Hello and welcome to this Sophos Certified Training course for Sophos XG Firewall. This is Module 2, Getting Started with XG Firewall. In this module, we will cover what you need to know to get up and running with an XG Firewall. From configuring an XG Firewall using the initial setup wizard, we will cover navigating and managing the XG Firewall using the web admin, through to the basic networking and routing configuration needed to integrate the XG Firewall into the network. Before we go through the network configuration wizard, let's look at the modes Sophos XG Firewall can be deployed in. Bridge mode, also known as transparent mode, puts Sophos XG Firewall in line so that it can monitor and scan all of the traffic and protect the network. It does this by transparently passing the traffic through. Note that some functions cannot be used in bridge mode and require either gateway mode or mixed mode. These include using the XG Firewall as a VPN concentrator and support for multiple WAN links. In gateway mode, Sophos XG Firewall provides zone-based filtering and scanning and acts as the entry and exit point for other networks and subnets. In most cases, the Sophos XG Firewall is the default gateway for the computers on the internal networks that it is protecting. Mixed mode is a combination of bridge mode and gateway mode, where two or more interfaces are bridged together transparently, but Sophos XG Firewall still acts as the gateway using ports which are not part of a bridge. In this diagram, the LAN and wireless network are bridged to create bridge port BR0. The final deployment mode is Discover mode. In this mode, the Sophos XG Firewall gets a copy of all of the network traffic that is passing through a switch on the network. This can be used to build a detailed report to show how Sophos XG Firewall would have handled the traffic and is useful for demonstrating and evaluating Sophos XG Firewall. To be able to include usernames in the reports, the XG Firewall needs to be integrated with an authentication server such as Active Directory. A port on the XG Firewall can be assigned as a TAP port after being configured in gateway mode. In this course, we will be focusing on gateway mode, as it is the most common mode of deployment. Before we begin, we need to understand how it is that we connect to the XG Firewall's web admin interface in order to gain access to the device. By default, the device's IP address will be 172.16.16.16, and the web admin on a Sophos XG Firewall runs on port 4444. So, to connect to the web admin interface, you would need to connect to https://172.16.16.16:4444 on a brand new device. There is also a user portal that is available on the XG that runs on port 443. Note, you will receive a certificate error when connecting to the XG Firewall, as it is using an untrusted, self-signed certificate. Sophos XG Firewall also has a command line interface, or CLI, that is accessible through SSH or a console connection. You may want to use the CLI to change the IP address of the management port to be in your LAN IP range. To log into the CLI, use the password of the built-in admin user. These are the parameters for serial console or connection to the device via COM port. Set the baud rate or speed to 38,400, data bits to 8, stop bits to 1, and parity and flow control should be none or 0. You can select which zones can use these access methods in the Device Access settings. The Initial Setup wizard enables quick and easy out-of-the-box setup. In addition to a new user-friendly wizard, the new process also allows the initial license registration process to be bypassed during the initial setup to streamline the process. Let's look at how all of this works with a simulation. This simulation will show the Sophos XG Firewall Initial Setup Wizard. Review the information at each stage and then click in the orange box to advance to the next slide. This walkthrough was done on a virtual XG firewall, and the network configuration is slightly different on a hardware device. On a hardware device, port 1 will default to the WAN, and all of the other ports will be bridged together to form the LAN. You can click the ports to add and remove them from the LAN bridge. The XG Firewall's interface has been designed to be both user-friendly and functional. A lot of thought and planning has gone into the design and placement of all of the menus and screen items that take residence in the XG's Web Admin Console. As we log into the Web Admin, we are presented with a view of the Control Center. In this view, we have an interactive overview of the XG Firewall and should quickly be able to identify anything that might be out of the ordinary. As we can see in this example, there is a system view that shows us a number of quick status icons for the XG related to performance, services, interfaces, and VPN status, as well as showing real-time information for CPU, memory, bandwidth, and the number of sessions being handled by the device. Each of these items can be clicked on to bring up a card with more detailed information without having to leave the control center. Next, we can see the Traffic Insight section with information related to web browsing and application control. A quick glance will give an administrator an overview of what users on the network are browsing. In the User and Device Insights, information related to security heartbeat, synchronized app control, Sandstorm, Advanced Threat Protection, and the User Threat Quotient can be seen. The bottom row of the Control Center contains the Active Firewall Rules section, which gives an overview of what types of rules are passing traffic, as well as a graph showing how much data is being processed by the rules. It also provides some information below the graph related to unused, disabled, changed, or newly created rules in the past 24 hours. The Reports section has a number of commonly accessed reports that can either be opened by clicking the name of the report or downloaded by clicking the arrow to the right of each report. It shows when the report was last updated and the size of the file. And finally, we come to the Messages section that contains alerts or information that should be useful to an administrator. As can be seen in the example, such things as security warnings or new firmware availability messages will be displayed and clickable to assist the admin in ensuring that the XG is operating to the best of its abilities. Besides having various items that can be clicked on within the Control Center, the main method of navigating the XG Firewall's web admin interface is the main menu along the left side of the screen. Here, we find various links that will allow us to navigate very quickly between the different modules of the XG Firewall. A quick rundown of the main topics include the Monitor and Analyze section, which houses links for information and discovery related to both users and the device. We can monitor user behavior as well as system resources from this area. The Protect group includes links that allow us to configure many of the policies and modules that will be used to secure the network, from basic firewall policies to advanced threat protection and web and application filtering. All of the protection modules can be found within. In the Configure section, we find various links to services provided by the XG related to networking, authentication, and connectivity. VPNs and routing are found here, as well as directory service authentication and logging options. The final group, the System section, contains various definitions and operating system options. Such things as scheduled definitions and traffic quotas, as well as host and network definitions, can be found within. But also, the XG's certificate authority and database are accessible from this group. To top it off, important administrative options such as licensing and options for backing up the configuration and upgrading the firmware are also found here. After selecting a topic from the main menu area, such as Web, found under Protect, you may find that there are additional menu items in the form of a tabbed layout at the top of the screen. These tabbed navigation links can be used to switch between the different sections of the selected main topic. If the screen is not wide enough to show all of the menu items, then a ... will be displayed at the end of the tabbed row, which, when clicked, will display any additional tabs in a separate drop-down menu. Found in Reports and VPN screens are additional Show VPN Settings or Show Reports Settings options that allow the administrator access to some less often used options related to reporting or VPN configuration. As can be seen here, when the menu option in the top right is clicked, the screen will flip to the additional options, and this special settings screen can be identified by the yellow title bar at the top of the page. Found on any screen within the web admin for the XG Firewall is a help link that can be clicked on to open up the context-sensitive help file in a separate window. This online version of the XG help is fully interactive and can be browsed by selecting the various menu items in the left side menu. It can also be searched for by keywords, and when a search result is selected, it will load the appropriate section within the help file. Found next to the Help menu item is the Admin menu. This menu contains a list of very useful options, including a link to the Sophos technical support site, a console window to enter CLI commands into the XG Firewall, options to reboot, shut down, lock, or log out of the XG Firewall, and even a way to launch the Startup Wizard that was offered during the initial installation of the XG Firewall. There is also a link for the administration page in the form of an About Product menu option. The top of every screen provides one-click access to the XG Firewall How-To library with videos and guides on how to perform common tasks in XG Firewall. The Sophos XG Firewall is an object-oriented system that allows administrators to create reusable objects that can represent hosts, services, networks, or even entire countries. These objects can then be used in various rules throughout the XG Firewall and give a visual view to the various rules and policies that are created. These same objects also make it easy to implement changes to the network configuration. If an object is modified, then all rules that use that object are updated with the new configuration as well. Objects are created in the Hosts and Services, which is found under the System heading. Many administrators go through the process of creating various objects when setting up the Sophos XG Firewall. Oftentimes, there are various hosts and services that they know they will need to create rules for, as well as networks, such as VLANs, that are not directly connected to the device. If these items are known ahead of time, they can be created before any rules or policies are added and can save time and confusion. Let's take a look at the various object types and their options. Within Hosts and Services, there are a number of options for creating different types of objects, each of which can be found in the tabs across the top menu bar of the Hosts and Services menu group. IP hosts are objects that can represent a single network host, a group of hosts, or an entire network. They are created from within the IP host section by clicking the Add button in the top right of the screen. In the next screen, assign a name to the new object, select if it is an IPv4 or IPv6 object, and the type of network object this will be. An IP object is for a single address. A network object allows us to use a subnet mask to define a network range. The IP range option allows for the entry of a beginning and ending IP address, and the IP list allows for the entry of individual IP addresses separated by commas. When creating any of the object types other than an IP list, there is also the option to add it to an IP host group. This is a convenient way to group together multiple IP objects to make creating rules and policies easier. An FQDN host allows us to create fully qualified domain name objects that can be grouped together within an FQDN host group. Similar to IP hosts, click the Add button on the FQDN host tab and fill in the required information. Give the object a name that will help you identify it when being added to a policy. Enter the fully qualified domain name for the object, and optionally, add the FQDN host to one or more groups so that it can be used more easily in large policies. Note, fully qualified domain name host objects also support wildcards with an asterisk prefix. A country group is a list of IP ranges that are categorized by what is assigned to specific countries by a group known as ICANN. These lists are maintained by Sophos, and a number of predefined larger groups are ready and waiting for use in the XG Firewall. Of course, an administrator has the ability to create their own custom groups or modify the existing supergroups that ship with the device. To create a group, click on the Add button in the top right of the screen. Or, to modify an existing group, click on the pencil icon to the right of the group name or on the name of the group itself. When adding a country group, we must first give the group a meaningful name so that we can identify it within our policies, and optionally a description to assist others with the purpose of the group. Then, using the Select Country drop-down list, select one or more countries that you would like to include in the group. Be sure to save your choices after you are done. There exist many pre-created service objects in the XG Firewall for common protocols such as DHCP, HTTPS, SMTP, and many others. Of course, we could not include every single service definition for every application that exists, so administrators have the ability to create their own definitions. Services are created by clicking the Add button in the top right, or service objects that have been created by an administrator can be edited by clicking the name or the pencil icon. However, the pre-existing services that ship with the device cannot be modified. User-created objects will appear above any pre-existing service objects. When creating a new service object, we begin by giving the object a name that will help us in identifying what service the object represents. Next, we select what type of service object to create. This can be a basic TCP/UDP object where we define source and destination ports for the object, or an IP service where we have the option to select predefined services from a drop-down list. We can also select various ICMP message types to create object definitions from. As with other objects, services can also be grouped together to make them easier to manage when creating rules and policies in the XG Firewall. Like with other groups, creating a service group is straightforward. After selecting the Add New Group, enter a name and description for the group to help identify the purpose of the services. Then, select the service objects from the list of available services and be sure to save the group when finished. We are now going to look at zones. The first question we want to ask ourselves is, what is a network zone? There are various ways to define a network zone. Some say that it is an area of administration for which you can exert control. Another definition is a logical or physical group of networks and hosts in an environment. For the XG Firewall, a zone is an area from which traffic originates or is destined to. In other words, it is the physical ports or virtual interfaces through which traffic will enter and leave the firewall. The XG is also a zone-based firewall. This means that interfaces can be assigned to zones in the firewall, and then security and policies can be managed by controlling traffic moving between the zones rather than into or out of a specific interface. This allows for more flexible control over the traffic while reducing administrative overhead for configuration. There are a number of predefined zones that were created upon installation. These include the LAN zone. This is the most secure zone by default. The WAN zone. This zone is used for external interfaces that provide internet access. DMZ zone. This zone was created with the idea that it will host publicly accessible servers. The VPN zone. This is the only zone that does not have a physical port or interface assigned to it. When a VPN is established, the port or interface used by the connection is dynamically added to the zone and removed when disconnected. And the Wi-Fi zone. This zone exists to provide security for wireless internet services. An administrator can also create additional zones in order to further customize traffic flow and security. When creating a zone for use with interfaces, there are a number of options that can help to secure or open the zone to specific traffic. Like with most items, we begin by giving the new zone a name and optionally a description. We then assign the zone a type. Zone types can be LAN or DMZ and follow the rules of the pre-configured LAN and DMZ type zones. If administrative access to the XG Firewall is desired from this new zone, select the protocols that will be allowed into the XG for administration. The same goes for authentication. If you would like to be able to authenticate users coming from the new zone, select the type of authentication that will be available from within the zone. The Network Services section allows you to decide if the XG will answer DNS requests or ping requests from clients in the new zone. And finally, in the Other Services category, check the box next to any services which you would like to allow to pass through this zone. The XG Firewall supports a number of different interface types besides the onboard physical interfaces. These include bridge, VLAN, alias, lag, and RED interfaces. A bridge interface allows for the merging of two or more interfaces into a transparent Layer 2 or Layer 3 bridge to allow for seamless communication between interfaces. A VLAN interface allows the administrator to create a virtual LAN interface on one of the existing XG interfaces, and is used when the XG device is required to perform inter-VLAN routing or tagging. An alias allows the adding of additional IP addresses to an existing interface. A lag is a group of interfaces acting as one single connection, which can provide redundancy and increased speed between two devices. And the red interface is used to configure and connect red hardware devices back to the XG firewall. Interfaces, or ports, are added to zones from Configure, Network, Interfaces. When creating or editing a port or interface, in the drop-down list for Network Zone, simply select the zone you wish to use. You can then use your new zones in firewall rules or policies. The WAN Link Manager allows administrators to modify any existing gateways on the XG firewall, as well as configure failover policies if there are more than one gateway configured on the device. In the WAN Link Manager, you will be able to see a list of any configured IPv4 or IPv6 gateway interfaces. These interfaces are automatically added to the WAN Link Manager when an interface is created on the firewall in the WAN zone. By clicking on the gateway name, the gateway details will be shown. From here, the gateway IP address can be modified and the gateway can be set as a backup gateway instead of an active gateway. The weight can then be set for the route, and the default NAT policy can be changed here as well. The failover rules will help to define when to move a connection over to another gateway. In the DNS configuration, the DNS servers that are used by the firewall for name resolution can be configured. These same servers are also used by clients when they perform a recursive query to the XG firewall. For IPv4 DNS servers, they can be obtained from DHCP or PPPoE if there exists a WAN connection of the matching type. Otherwise, they will have to be entered manually into the system. Up to 3 DNS server IPs can be entered. IPv6 has similar settings as those for IPv4, the only difference being the lack of support for PPPoE connections. With IPv6, the DNS server address can be obtained through DHCP or manually entered. Finally, you can set which type of server to query first, IPv4 or IPv6. There is also a button to take you to a test page for name resolution. A DNS request route can be used to send specific domain name lookup requests to specific servers for name resolution. This can be very useful if you would like to use external servers for public internet name resolution, but still be able to resolve names for internal domain resources. To get started, in the DNS request route section, click the Add button. In the settings for the new request route, enter the domain name that you would like to redirect DNS resolution for, and then select the target servers that will be used to resolve these names. In this example, any requests for the sophostraining.local domain will be sent to the server st-dc.local for name resolution. Access to the services running on the XG Firewall are enabled and disabled per zone by selecting the checkboxes in this table found in System, Administration, Device Access. There are 4 categories of services that can be configured. Admin services control access to the XG Firewall web admin and console. Access to the web admin is always via HTTPS. The console can be accessed via SSH or Telnet. Please note that support for Telnet will be removed in a forthcoming release. Authentication services are used to identify users. Network services determine whether the XG Firewall can be pinged from a zone and whether it can be used as a DNS server. Finally, Other Services provides control for all of the remaining services run on the XG Firewall. You can also enable and disable services when creating or editing zones in Configure, Network, Zones. Exceptions can be created to the zone-based device access settings to allow or deny access to services for specific hosts and networks. Here, we can see that no admin services are allowed from the WAN zone. This means that no one can log in remotely to the web admin. If the XG Firewall management is outsourced, you may want to create an exception that allows your management provider to log in from the WAN zone. Here we can see how this exception is configured. Exceptions can be created for either IPv4 or IPv6, but not in the same exception. If you need to configure the exception for both IPv4 and IPv6, you will need to create 2 exceptions. Select the zone which the exception rule is for. In this example, it is the WAN zone. Select which networks and hosts the exception will apply to. These can be an IP, IP range, IP list, host group, network, country host, or country host group. In this example, we have added the public IP address of the MSP. Select which services this exception is for. In this example, it is for HTTPS and SSH admin services. And finally, select whether this is an exception to allow or drop. In this example, we are using the exception to allow access to the HTTPS and SSH admin services from the WAN zone. However, you may be creating an exception to block connections. An example may be to block access to the user portal or SSL VPN from countries that users do not operate in. The admin user can be authenticated using public key authentication for SSH access. This provides a mechanism that can be used to provide access without needing to share the admin password, and it can be used to provide access to multiple users by uploading their public keys. The XG Firewall supports RSA, DSA, and ECDSA keys of 1024, 2048, and 4096 bits in length. Keys can be created using a tool such as PuTTY Key Generator on Windows or SSH Keygen on Linux. Here, you can see a key that has been generated using PuTTY. The public key displayed here is uploaded to the XG Firewall. The private key is then saved for the user connecting to authenticate themselves. SSH connections are logged in /log/dropbear.log. When the SSH connection is authenticated using keys, the thumbprint of the key is logged with the IP address that the connection was initiated from. The XG Firewall comes with a default certificate called Appliance Certificate. This is used to provide HTTPS for the admin portal, user portal, and SSL VPNs. The common name on this certificate is the serial number of the appliance, which means that you will almost certainly get a certificate error when you log in. Certificates can be added to the XG Firewall and can then be selected to be used in place of the default appliance certificate. There are 3 options for doing this. Upload a certificate that has been signed by an external trusted certificate authority. This could be a third-party company such as GlobalSign or an internal enterprise certificate authority. To upload a certificate, you need to provide the certificate, private key, and the passphrase for decrypting the private key. Generate a self-signed certificate. This will be generated and signed by the XG Firewall's own default signing certificate authority. The third option is to generate a CSR and download it along with the private key and passphrase. This is a signing request for a certificate that can be signed by either a third-party company or an internal enterprise certificate authority. Once you have the certificate, you can then upload it to the XG Firewall. The XG Firewall comes pre-configured with the certificates for Common Trusted Internet Root Certificate Authorities. These are used to verify the certificates of devices the XG Firewall connects to. You can also upload additional CA certificates that you want to trust, such as an internal enterprise CA that signs the certificates for your internal servers. The XG Firewall also acts as a certificate authority and so comes with 2 signing CAs. The default signing CA is used for signing server certificates. The Security Appliance SSL CA is used for creating the certificates used in HTTPS web scanning and securing TLS SSL email connections. You can upload additional signing CAs by providing the private key with the CA certificate when you upload it. These CAs can then be selected for use in web and email protection. The email CAs can be separately selected for SMTPS and IMAP-S and POP-S. This is done in Email General Settings. The Web CA for HTTPS scanning can be selected in Web Protection. One of the primary functions of an edge device is its ability to route packets from one network location to another. While routing is often considered a basic function of a device such as the XG Firewall, there are numerous options for routing within the device. There are simple static routes that only look at the destination address of the traffic. These are often used internally to control traffic flow within a network. The XG Firewall also offers policy-based routing, which allows the device to dig deeper into the traffic and make more intelligent decisions based on factors other than just the destination, such as the source address or services. Dynamic routing protocols are also supported to allow the XG Firewall to communicate with neighbors and populate its internal routing tables with minimal administrator interaction. Unlike the kernel routing, the XG routing precedence can be modified on the console using the system route precedence command. Let's take a look at an example. If we had a private network not connected directly to an interface on the XG Firewall, then the XG would have no way of determining where to send the traffic destined to for that network. This could be, for example, networks that are connected to a core switch, and the core switch is connected to the firewall via a separate private LAN. The simplest way to configure communication would be to set up some static routes. In order to do this, first navigate to Configure, Routing, Static Routing, and click the Add button for the unicast route you would like to create. In the Add Unicast Route screen, begin by entering the destination information. This needs to be in the format of an IP address, and then select a subnet mask from the available options in the drop-down list. Next, enter the IP address of the gateway that will be the next hop in the route. This must be typed in and is not a pre-created object. Then, select the port or interface that the XG Firewall will send the traffic out on. The selected interface must be able to communicate with the gateway address listed in the previous step. And finally, select a distance metric for this route. This will be used when deciding what route to use if the XG has multiple options. On completion of this module, you should now be able to perform the actions shown here. Please take a moment to review these. If you are not confident that you have met these objectives, please review the material covered in this module. Click Continue when you are ready to proceed. Now that you have completed this module, you should complete Module 3, Network Protection.